I came from a family of makers, whether it was electronics on the dining room table. My dad made TVs and different things. There were always projects, or my brother, who's a furniture maker. So I think I come about my making pretty honestly, that there was always a project. And I like to recall when I was very young and all my brothers got pocket knives and I wasn't allowed to have one. I was young, but still I wanted one. So I remember going in my dad's little shop, and he didn't have an electric grinder, it was a hand crank grinder, and I found a broken hacksaw blade and I proceeded to make my own little knife. So my life has been like that with making. It's like, if I see something, you know, that I want to make, I know I can make it. And I like to change the way it's made. Even though I'm following traditional methods, I'm changing the material and also some of the processes. I'm really interested in my work of forgotten industries of labor, whether it's logging, like the work upstairs, or mining, handiwork of the housewife. So that interests me because there's the human spirit, and it's facing treacheries and harshnesses, but through their labor, they find some kind of relief. With this installation upstairs, shift split, I wanted the viewer to experience this sort of history of objects and manual tools, and also to have a sense of who might have inhabited that or used that. When I'm making my work, I try to take the stance of if I had to make this, you know, if I were a miner and I needed, you know, a special kind of chisel, I might not be able to go buy it, I would make it. So I'm hoping that through that process, the way I'm looking at the work, that you see there's some kind of intention, and it, as Gia spoke a lot about things being familiar. So I feel that through the making of these objects, which is very labor intensive, that I have some kind of connection with past or with previous laborers or makers. And they act like a storyteller. The wood, if I cut down a tree, you know, the rings of the tree would tell us a story. You know, you might find a nail, or you might find, you know, maybe a carving of someone's initials in that. Same with the cowhide I'm using upstairs. It's like if the cow, you know, got scratched on a barbed wire fence, you know, on our beautiful, you know, Coach bag, there might be an imperfection, but that's actually a story. That's the cow, you know, in the pasture and experience it had. Also, the research is important alongside the making. I'm fascinated with the old drawings out of Boy Scout manuals, also notes that I've kind of culled on the internet of, you know, how to you know, tighten your barbed wire fence or your fence posts. And so there are drawings and notes and illustrations that people have made. My practice and my making, I'm in you know, our world today, and some of the materials that are mentioned in the manuals we can't readily find, but what interests me more is that I'm using contemporary materials and not archaic, but I would say older fashion. So the lashing that I use to tie stuff together in the installation wasn't anything new, but the materials I'm using. The tent is made like a two-part tent. Army tents were in 2 halves, so it was a 2-half tent, so it's to the specifications. Because of the pristine and new materials, they sometimes mix up the interpretation or the viewer experience. That's what I'm hoping that it's going to do. But also the use of the reflective materials, I'm trying to draw the viewer into that experience where they see themselves in the work. It's not just walking around the work, that they become part of it and they can complete the work. For example, you know, I've made a dead weight trap, the right part of the image, and that would be in the snare family, and that would have been used for, you know, food, gathering food to bonk an animal on the head and kill it. So I've made it out of, you know, this beautiful pristine tube that's chrome steel. So it started out as a rusty tube that I got at the junkyard and then sanded down and went to a chrome shop which does chroming for hot rods to bring that reflective surface. So you recognize it as something that could, if you pulled the stick, cause harm. The log in the far background is held up by wedges, which is the wedges in the mechanical family. It's one of the prime, not tools, but shapes used to move things or to separate. The work is formally addressed also as a sculptor in the space. The focus is on line, how I lead the viewer through the space, the surface texture. Like I said earlier, reduced to the minimal, the essential to represent what that piece, that shape could have been. Like the saw, the curry-colored saw on the left is, you know, it represents a cross saw, yet it's out of cloth. You recognize it because of the saw teeth. Here are saw teeth. I think it's pretty cool that shapes and designs of functional objects and tools that there's such a purpose to each part of it. Like the plain tooth, which I used to represent a saw in most of the work upstairs, versus maybe, you know, a perforated lance tooth. So there's a reason for that. Maybe it was a softer wood and there was no need for it to be solid so that, you know, wood didn't accumulate, sawdust didn't accumulate in it. My process, I don't draw often. I make maquettes. I go straight to the making, experiencing material. This is not exhibited upstairs, but I felt it was, you know, it's like, well, how do you go about, you know, constructing these things? And they're fun experiments. It's where I bring a lot of humor into my work. Sometimes I make stop animations with little creatures experiencing my maquettes. And that's all. Thank you.